Hi, I'm Jessie. This time we're going to do a video about how to use a game management system in Unity. So if you have a project where you need to carry data from one scene to the next, we'll talk about how you can create a game object that will hold that information for you.
All right, so in this video, we're going to continue on with our game, but we're going to implement a system where we can keep track of our score between scenes. So by default, the objects that you create in each individual scene are only in that scene. When you load the next scene, everything that was there is destroyed and all of the new stuff is brought in from the next scene. Things are not persistent from scene to scene. So we're going to learn how you make an object that will stay, that can keep track of your score as you go through the game. And so what we're going to do is create an empty game object. And this object is going to be our game controller. Now, on our game controller, the only thing that is going to be on this object is a script that will be our game control script. So I'm going to make a script called game control, and I'm going to put it on our game controller. Okay, so let's go into this script. So what we want to do is we'll remove these. First, we want to create a variable reference to this script that is static. So we're giving it a name, and that name will stay. So I'm going to create a public static reference to the game control script, and we're going to give it a name. So we're going to refer to our game control script as control. So it's basically giving it a nickname. Because it's public and static, we can use any other script to say, hey, find control. Let me talk to control. Once we have that, what we want to do is in our awake function, set up some logic. So in our awake function, this function awake is called before the start function in the other scripts. So this is one of the first things that gets called when a scene loads in Unity. So basically we want to say, if there's a control object already, delete control. So we're going to put a copy of this game object in every single scene. So we're going to delete this. If there's no control, make this the control object. We'll actually start with if there's no control, make this the control object. So these are the two things that we need to keep track of. If control doesn't exist, so if it's null, then we're going to set control equal to this. Now what this is the script itself. So we're referring to the script component itself. That's this. We're going to say, this is now the control object, and don't destroy on load. So what this means is when we go to the next scene, don't destroy this. Keep this. Keep this object around. And we're going to keep our game object. When I say just game object, that means the game object that this script is on. So this is like this, us, our control object. If there's no control, if this is the first time that we are playing the game, the first scene that's loading, there's no control object. The scene plays, the script gets loaded on awake, so it's the first thing to come alive, and we've set the control object equal to this script. So this script is our master control object. But if we put this into another script, and you'll see that if we put this into another scene, which you'll see in a second, there will be this control object and the other control object. So this one will be coming in from the first scene to the second scene because it's not being destroyed. And so we have to then destroy the one that's in the second scene so that it won't start causing problems for us. If control is not equal to this, So imagine if I'm in the second scene, I'm the script in the second scene, and there's already a control object that's not me, then I need to destroy myself. Destroy game object. This is the logic of what we're doing. So if there's no control, this is the control. But if there's already a control, then we destroy ourselves. The logic of putting one of these into every single scene is it gives us a little bit of a backup. So if something happens and it gets destroyed, we'll have a new one kind of ready, but the goal is to carry data from one scene to the next. So I'm going to save this. So we have our singleton logic set up. All right. Now, what we want to do is this is the thing that will keep track of our score. So I need to create a variable that will be our score variable. So I'm going to make a public integer called score. And we will be changing this every time we collect an object. So I can save this. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go back to the script, back to Unity. And we have our game control object. And I need to place one of these in every scene. So I'm going to drag it down to make it into a prefab so I can put a copy of it into every scene. I'm going to save this scene. And so this is in scene number 1. And so the other scene where we're keeping score is scene number 2. So I will then put the game controller in scene number 2. I'll also put it in my end scene. So now there's a copy in every scene. Okay. So now we need to tell our other scripts to tell the game controller when we are collecting objects and getting a score. So I'll go back here. So when we collect an object here, what we want to do is not only destroy the collected object, but we need to tell game control that our score has changed. So if we collect an object, we're going to say, go talk to game control. So game control dot control. So we're going to say, hey, go find me game control. Access the score variable in game control and add to it. So I'm adding 1 to my score every time I collect an object. I'm also going to print out my score. Game control dot control. This is how you access a variable in your game control script. So it's in the script called game control that has the nickname control, and then this is the name of the variable that we create. So I could have a bunch of different variables. I could have score and health and, magic levels and everything in here. And I could have things happening in my other scripts that change those values. And the only thing that game control is doing is just keeping track of these numbers. Every time another script is like, hey, score is +1, and it will just listen and say, okay, let's see if this is working. We'll go back to Unity and hit play. So we have a score of 1, a score of 2, a score of 3, and then we can go into our next scene. And if we had not put our game control objects linked together here, it would restart. Our score would be 0 again, but it's adding to it. It knows that our score was already 3, and now we have a score of 4 and a score of 5, and we win. So now that we have a number that is tracking how many collectible objects we've done or we've grabbed, we can start to do some logic in our games. You can only transition to the next scene if you've collected all of these objects. So what I can do is, in this script, when I touch the door, my scene transitions. But what if I only want it to transition if I've collected all of the objects? So I can only go once I've completed the scene. So we can start to bring in some logic here. So if I touch the door, and my game control dot score is equal to 3, then I can load the scene. So I can check my score. Do I have a score of 3? Okay, then I can load my next scene. So we can test this. So 1, 2, oh, it's not working. I have to go collect the last one. And then I can touch the door and it'll load the next scene. So we can start to have some game logic that will only let us, we have to complete the level before we go on to the next scene. In this scene, we wanted to set up when you click the last game object, you win. So we can say if our score is, like, you can only get this one, maybe you have to have a certain number of collectibles before you collect the special one. So you can set up a little bit of logic here. So you can start to do the same thing. If I hit my end game object and my game control dot score is equal to 5, then we can end the scene. So we can check our score again, be like, have you collected everything? Okay, then you win. So we can start this here. So I'll play my first scene. So here, collect, next scene, 1, 2, and now we win. All right, so just to quickly review, the way that you set up the game controller is creating an empty game object that has the game control stripped on it. This you should drag down to become a prefab, and then you want to place a copy of this in every scene. So I have it in every single gameplay scene starting at scene number 1. When you want to access the data in game control, so you create public variables, and then you can access these variables in your other scripts by referring to the game control object. And this would be whatever variable name that you've created. And they could be integers or strings or floats or booleans or any kind of variable you want, you can access it in this way.